I was shocked when I found out that my mom is having an affair with Steve. All the memories from when I first invited Steve to breakfast came back, and the moment when Steve received a text message from my mom when we were playing a video game, and when he would disappear during his visit to my house. All those memories came back. It all added up. I was so dumbfounded and embarrassed. I got visibly sick and lightheaded. I wanted to sit on the pavement on the side of the road when Steve asked me if I was okay. I told him that I felt like throwing up. I was feeling sick, so we went back to our apartment. When we got there, he wanted us to play video games, but I turned him down because I didn't want to be anywhere near him at that moment. I was so embarrassed. It was a big shame, not just for me, but for my dad. The thought of Steve doing that to my mom was so humiliating. Words cannot describe the feeling. I wanted to call my dad and tell him, but what would I say? What evidence do I have? Fantastic claim like that requires fantastic evidence. Otherwise, both would deny it, and the shame will be on me. My dad is such a good man, and he didn't deserve this. He was trying to fix his marriage, trying to keep the family together, and my mom seems to have been banging Steve for a little over a year now. I remember staying in bed crying. I wanted to talk to someone, but I held back because I know she would literally throw up. She wouldn't be able to control herself. She would confront my mom, evidence or not. She would tell my dad, with or without evidence. In a few days, my mom was getting ready to go to a romantic trip with my dad. As part of an effort my dad was putting towards fixing his marriage. I know my dad. He was trying to work on his marriage so his children would follow his footsteps. Why my mom had been sleeping with someone the same age as my sister, young enough to be her son. I remember thinking how the good image I had of my mom was shattered that day. I was discouraged to even investigate further because I was afraid of what kind of evidence I would uncover. I'm not sure what got me out of bed that day. Maybe Steve was calling me, but I remember being depressed, not longing for food nor water. I remember sitting on the couch with Steve and internally blaming him for the problems my parents have been going through in their marriage. Over the next few days, I didn't know how to get more evidence because I didn't know how to get Steve to unlock his phone and read his text messages. A week later, my mom and dad were back from their romantic getaway. My mom called me, but I refused to answer her calls. My dad called and I answered. He asked me how I was doing. He was telling me how much fun they had on their trip. He was excited about the activities and sites they visited together. In my mind, I was shedding tears because I wasn't sure he really knows who he's married to. He asked me why I was so quiet, and I said nothing. And he reminded me that my mom had been trying to get in touch with me. I avoided my mom's calls for a few days till it started becoming strange. I replied and told her that I was busy. Clearly, she knows something was not right, and she must have told Steve about it because he was trying to cheer me up. Slowly but surely, it worked. My dad called me a couple of times, and I felt like everything was going good back home. He seemed happy. Always seemed to speak well of my mom when we spoke on the phone. I was thinking to myself like, well, I know my mom did and is still doing the unthinkable, but the secret, if exposed, will ruin my family forever. And I don't know how I feel about that. About 2 months in, I couldn't find a way to gain access to Steve's phone again, so I can read the text conversation between him and my mom. We were roommates, but I was doing my best to avoid him. I started losing interest in playing video games. He would invite me to play, but I would turn him down. I am a social person. I'm comfortable around people, so I'm able to make friends easily. I started hanging out with new friends. One day, I got invited to a party, and I got dressed up. Steve was in the living room playing video games. I think that was when I started getting into a phase where I wasn't into video games as I used to before. Maybe because playing video games reminded me of Steve and my mom, and how all these problems started. So as I was getting ready to leave the house that Friday or Saturday night, Steve asked me where I was going. I told him that I was invited to a party. He asked to tag along and I said sure. When we got to the party, Steve was in the corner, just watching and drinking, not socializing or talking to girls. He was filled with anxiety. He just stood there and drank till he got drunk. The next time I saw him, he was sitting on the floor at the corner. When the party was over, I stood him up with my arms across his waist to carry him. That was when his phone fell out of his pocket and fell to the floor. I knew I had a chance that night to get the evidence I needed that has eluded me for so long. We reached our apartment, and by the time we got to his room, he was already passed out. He didn't know how to hold down the alcohol because he wasn't a drinker. I took him to his room and laid him on his bed. His phone was face recognition iPhone, so I used it on his face while he was passed out and unlocked his phone. I went to my room and spent the entire night taking screenshots of text messages that spanned for over a year between Steve and my mom. I didn't read most of the text messages at the time, as I was focused on taking pictures of the text messages as evidence, but I saw the photos they exchanged. I was shocked that my mom was exchanging explicit photos with him. They were telling each other how they loved each other. And guess what? A shocker. My mom was coming to visit him in 2 weeks. I didn't know that. Imagine your mom driving 350 miles to your university to see your best friend without letting you know that she was coming. That was because she wasn't coming to visit me. I felt unloved and betrayed. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I remember pacing around the room that night, trying to think of ways to murder Steve. Maybe I should carry him to the middle of the road, leave him there for a car to run over him. That night, I mistakenly fell asleep without returning his phone. The following morning, he woke up before me and was looking for his phone. He came to my room and found it. He woke me up and thanked me for carrying him into the house, and he thought he had lost his phone when he woke up. It took me a few days to get my thoughts together and call my dad. I wasn't going to read through all the text messages because it was absolutely disgusting. What's more disgusting than reading through how your 43-year-old mom is telling your 20-year-old friend how she's going to do all kinds of explicit things to him? Some of the text messages I read still traumatize me till this day. I found out that my mom was sending him money as well, and she made his down payment for a car. Additionally, she was canceling events with her family to make time for him. If she wanted to fall in love with him and run away with him, so be it. But she should not have been dragging the entire family along. It's not like what she was doing was against the law, because he was a consenting adult when the affair started. She was just comfortable with having a side thing going on. Why blaming my dad for all her problems? That evening, my dad called me. The first question I asked him was if mom was going anywhere in 2 weeks, and he told me that she was going to see a patient for 2 days. That's the 2 days she was planning to stay with Steve. I told him exactly what was going on and sent him all the evidence I had collected. My dad was devastated by this. He was trying to hold it together. I asked him what he was going to do, and he said that he was going to get a divorce. He lamented about how he tried everything. It was a really sad day for us. He thought that the marriage was getting better, but he didn't know that she was having an affair behind his back for over a year. My dad told me not to tell my mom and sister, and he would handle it by himself. The following day, my dad called me back. He was angrier than the day before. Perhaps he had read all the messages, and it got him fired up. He said that he now wanted to catch my mom and Steve red-handed at the hotel. I thought that was unnecessary and would be too dramatic, but I didn't tell him that. I just went along. I guess he didn't want to go through the trouble of telling my mom that her son found the text messages. He wanted it to seem as if he was the one that discovered that she lied to him about going to meet her patient, but instead went to a hotel to bang her son's friend. The plan was for me and my dad to catch her red-handed at the Hiltons when she visits Austin. Fast forward 2 weeks. My mom didn't tell me that she was in town. She came to see Steve, and only Steve. My dad installed a GPS on her car, so he knew where she was. My dad already made arrangements for me to move out of my apartment and paid the penalties for breaking my leaves without Steve's knowledge. He already found a place to stay from our family home. My dad didn't even tell me my sister was flying in from California as well. I was kind of worried because that was unlike him. He was the type of person that would try to shield us from something like this. My dad was so cliché. He also brought a divorce paper to serve my mom at the hotel. I guess he had been reading some of the forums to know that. On D-Day, I knew my mom was in the hotel. Steve got ready and left. Me, my sister, and dad followed behind him to the hotel. I remember feeling embarrassed and awkward. I have never seen my dad so mad. His eyes were red, like he had been drinking. We didn't know the room number of the hotel where my mom was staying with Steve. So while we were at the hotel lobby, my dad called my mom on his cell phone. I didn't know what he asked her, but somehow he tricked her into coming down to get something from her car. When she came downstairs on our way to her car, she was shocked to find the three of us there. She couldn't explain herself. That was when my dad served her the divorce paper. I swear my mom would have dug a hole in the same spot she was standing and bury herself if she could. I thought my dad would go crazy on her, but no, he just delivered the divorce paper. Then the yelling began. Now I knew why he brought my sister. He needed someone to tell my mom a piece of his mind, and my sister let my mom have it. Few months later, I haven't spoken to Steve, and I haven't spoken to my mom either. She has been reaching out, but I ignore her. I hope time will heal all wounds. As far as I know, the night we caught them together was the last time Steve and my mom ever met. At least that was what the voice message she sent me said. She still hasn't recovered mentally, but I know at some point I have to respond because she's still my mom. It has been difficult for my dad ever since D-Day. He has been focusing more on work to get his mind off of it.